Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. This is episode number 49 and today is December 2nd, 2020. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about where the opportunity exists in commercial real estate right now, why furnace checks are so important, and we're going to answer some questions from housing providers around the country. Before we get into all that, we're going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find those live on Facebook at facebook.com/Buffalo Foreclosed Homes. You can find the replay the same day on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube page over at youtube.com/OwnBuffalo. Don't forget to check out our Instagram. We do post content there that doesn't normally fit into Facebook or YouTube. Usually that's more of our photo content and things like that. And last but not least, don't forget that you can grab a free 30-minute consultation with me over at ownbuffalo.com as well. I do have one time slot available left this week, and then I have a couple of time slots open for the following week. Don't forget that these drop away, these disappear on December 31st of this year. So if you're thinking about trying to get on the calendar, you want to ask some questions, you're just not sure, you've got a very short timeline with which to get on my calendar and grab one of these free consults. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity over at ownbuffalo.com. Click on the button to register for a free 30-minute phone consult. Last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every Thursday morning. That means that if you're watching this live, you'll be able to download the newest episode tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to be taking a look at renting out a gym space to residential tenants on a small property, on a duplex, which is what makes it interesting. Should you pay contractors for unauthorized work and tenants flushing their couch down the toilet? I want to say that was a new one by me, but I also tell a story after that of a similar tale here that we had in Buffalo. So definitely a good episode. Don't miss out. New episodes drop every Thursday, anywhere podcasts are heard. You can also grab that over at rentprep.com/podcast. We'll start our day off with a little bit of humor here before we get into the news of the day. I don't remember where I pulled this from. It had to have been one of the Facebook groups or something like that. I assume that this is the carpet on a set of stairs in a hotel or something like that. Hopefully you didn't have one too many wobbly pops when you were on your way back to the hotel and trying to find your way to your hotel room, because that would certainly trip me up. I don't know about you guys, but it would definitely trip me up. So all right, let's jump over to our news of the day. So we're actually going to be spending a lot of time looking at some examples here in the Western New York market, but the principles that I'm talking about today can basically be applied to any market across the country. I think that the stuff that we're talking about here today, you're going to see in basically any other major market, not that Buffalo is a major market. You're going to see this in pretty much any place with a metro, essentially. A metro followed by outskirts of suburbs and rural, which is pretty much everywhere. You're going to see these same messages repeating themselves time over time. So though we're talking a lot about Buffalo, the Western New York market today, these lessons can definitely be applied across the entire country. The first article and all of these articles today come from Buffalo Business First. The first article I wanted to take a look at is COVID disrupts the momentum of regional development. I'm going to read this first part here and then we're going to skip through to a couple of other sections. It's tough to figure out the region's economic development landscape. The pandemic clearly has impacted the momentum that had been building in Western New York for the past few years, so developers have taken a more cautious approach to projects. People are still looking over prospective projects right now, said Nick Sinatra and Company Real Estate CEO, but final decisions probably won't be made for another 3, 6, or 9 months from now. I don't think, and rightfully so, there's an end to the level of caution everyone is feeling right now. The dollar value of projects reported in the 2020 Build Western New York report rose 3.1% from $20.15 billion in 19 to $20.77 billion in 2020. Those projects are completed, under construction, and proposed in the 8 counties of Western New York. Here are 5 key takeaways from that data. Number 1, the $20.77 billion figure was a bit of a surprise given the pandemic landscape. The number of reported projects dropped less than 1%, falling from 1,209 to 1,196, a decrease of just 13 projects. That's really impressive given the fact that we are in the middle of the pandemic. To see that most of these projects are still moving forward in some capacity is good news. When you're seeing a decrease of only 13 projects, There's a multitude of reasons that those projects could have fallen apart or not moved forward at this point, but it's really good to see that there are still a lot of projects, a lot of developments moving forward. Skipping forward a little bit into this article, hotel and hospitality development is in a lengthy pause. Developer Peter Krogh has opted to hold off on further construction related to the $80.5 million Trico project on Ellicott Street that will eventually include 2 hotels, both operated by Hart Hotels Incorporated. Hart Hotels is a local hotel operator here in Western New York. Canadian investor Harry Stinson, owner of the Buffalo Grand Hotel, that used to be the former Adams Mark, has decided to convert 200 of the 486-room hotel into apartments. 377 Main Realty LLC, the investment group that owns the AM&A's department store building. And for those of you outside the Buffalo market, that's a large building right in the heart of downtown Buffalo. Used to be a department store, and it's long since been vacant. There's been some history back and forth on redeveloping the site. The most recent plans called for a hotel and office space with a little bit of retail. So they've scrapped the plans for the 330-room hotel and opted for office space and 49 apartments. More of a movement from hotel to apartments. The hotel industry is just decimated, said William Palladino, Ellicott Development Company president and CEO. The company's working on the $120 million Elmwood Crossing project that was to include a hotel but may switch to all apartments and condos. Outside Buffalo and Erie County, there were still strong numbers. $2.23 billion in projects Niagara County, $2.2 billion Chautauqua County, $649 million in Genesee County. You really have to feed the elephant, but do it one bite at a time. I believe that's a typo there. There's no denying that the pandemic will still yield caution. I think everybody pretty much understands that point. But I wanted to highlight in this article, there's been a strong movement in the hotel world, and I'm seeing this not just here locally, I am seeing it in places like Florida as well, where you have hotels that are starting to look into, okay, can we turn a hotel room into an efficiency apartment, a studio apartment, something along those lines, to try to offset the lack of revenues coming in from hotel rooms right now. We're seeing a lot of that, and I think that that's going to continue. And then scrolling back up here, we'd already talked a little bit about the projects and things like that. So this is just kind of an overview article that talks about, on a broad scale, kind of what's happening. Jumping in a little bit further here now, let's start to kind of dig in here. After languishing for more than a generation, the Bethlehem Steel site rises again. For those not in the Buffalo market, the Bethlehem Steel site was actually one of the largest production sites for steel products back when Buffalo was a steel city, before we stopped producing steel, essentially. Bethlehem Steel was one of the largest producers of steel in the country at that time. At least that's my understanding. I could be completely off base by saying that. That said, the site's been inactive for a long time, and basically, I don't want to say just left to rot, but in a lot of ways just kind of left to rot. And we've been seeing a lot more development over along the waterfront in the past few years, along the Bethlehem Steel area, and then further north into the actual city of Buffalo. We are starting to see more and more development in those areas, as well as with the Port of Buffalo, which is basically our connection to the outside world via ship. We have the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway, which is basically how we can ship something from the Port of Buffalo all the way out to sea. And there's a lot more that goes into it. I'm not going to jump into all the ins and outs. But there's been some redevelopment on this site as well. And it goes in and talks about some of the changes that have been happening to this site. But one thing that I wanted to jump back down into here is this little tidbit right here. Sucrose Sourcing LLC, a sugar producer based in Coral Gables, Florida, leased a series of silos and warehouse space earlier this year in Lackawanna's Gateway Trade Zone complex, which is on a portion of the Bethlehem Steel property. That's something that I wanted to mention, and the reason that I wanted to mention that is because this particular company has actually just signed a deal to become a little bit more permanent in that area. They had some, basically a temporary setup there where they could receive, sugar and things like that through the Port of Buffalo, and as a result of things going as well as they have, they've now decided to become a permanent fixture there. They're building, permanent silos and things along that nature. It means that the port is growing, essentially. The other thing that's not mentioned in this article, but that I did read in another article, is that our port here in Buffalo was recently certified as an organic port, which means that we can now receive organic goods as well And that was also as a result of this sucrose sourcing LLC, because they wanted to start importing organic sugar from Argentina, as a matter of fact. So kind of an interesting little development there. This is the other thing that I picked out of this article that I thought was incredibly interesting. Uniland Development Company is negotiating with Erie County IDA to build a spec building at Route 5 and Dona Street. I'm assuming that that spec building is probably going to be either all warehouse or warehouse and office. And the reason I say that is because Western New York is running a huge deficit in available commercial warehousing space right now. With this being right at the Port of Buffalo, with it being intermodal, because you have the port, you have rail, you have road, everything essentially right there in one spot, I would anticipate that that's going to be warehouse space or warehouse with a little bit of office, something along those lines. So that's interesting to see there being some development there. Looking for a commercial opportunity in real estate, warehousing is huge in Western New York right now. Jumping out of that article into our next article, Life Storage gets key vote. McGuire project greenlighted. This is with regards to some planning board votes here in the city of Buffalo. We're not going to read through this entire article, but if you're not familiar, Life Storage is a large storage company, like a self-storage company. I believe they're nationwide at this point. At some points, they had done business under the name Uncle Bob's Self-Storage, and then they, I think, had changed that when they merged with Sovereign Self-Storage or something along those lines. They've been buying up little guys left and right for a lot of years now, and now they're operating under the name Life Storage. Basically what you need to know if you're outside of Western New York and confused by this article. So they're in the process right now. They actually just got an approval for a new facility, a new flagship facility right next door to an existing facility that they have in the city of Buffalo. The 3-story, 84,000 square foot self-storage center at 400 Kenmore Ave is set to be a model when Life Storage executives court new franchisees. It'll be next to the existing Life Storage Center. It's designed as a flagship, said Peter Murad, project architect and architectural resources managing principal for Life Storage. They wanted to create a signature facility. There is a huge demand for self-storage, and I don't want to say it's recession-proof, but it's basically recession-proof. I mean, I can remember when I came out of college, I rented a storage unit for like 2 years. To store stuff that I just didn't need or didn't have room for in my first place or whatever. And in the entire 2 years that I had the storage unit, I maybe went to the thing twice, but I kept writing that check every single month like clockwork. People love to pay to store their crap. There's definitely a shortage of self-storage. It's a very stable market. And in the middle of a pandemic, stable is what you're looking for. So self-storage, I think there's some opportunities there as well. Last but not least, we're going to move to the east in Western New York and talk about Genesee County. This is more related to agribusiness. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is that people forget that there's a lot of opportunity outside of traditional real estate type projects. And this is one of those type of situations where, you know, agribusiness is typically specialized facilities and things like that. Here in Western New York, we do have a lot of dairy farms. We also have, just a lot of farming in general. Once you get outside of the city and the suburbs, it's country just like most areas. So we do have a lot of dairy farms. We produce a lot of dairy products. And we have the Upstate Farm Collective, the Upstate Niagara Cooperative, which is basically a cooperative of a lot of the dairy farmers in Western New York. They pool together, I don't know all the details, they pool together all of their dairy resources and use it to produce milk to everyone's benefit. And like I said, I don't know all the details about how it works, but I know that it has worked for a good long time now. So the reason I mentioned Genesee County and the agribusiness is because there are a lot of specialized facilities that are in demand and need to be built. And in Genesee County right now, there's areas where they're specifically targeting agribusiness type industry. And we can see that right here when you talk about the Upstate Niagara Cooperative. They just bought a 27,000 square foot former Alpina Foods plant to produce Greek yogurt. This was a plant that was built in, I believe, Batavia area, that was open for a little while. I believe they got some state incentives, and ultimately the company pulled out of the project. Upstate Farms was able to jump in, and now they're able to produce that product using locally sourced, this, that, the other thing. It's good news for everybody. In Pembroke's Buffalo East Technology Park, Yancey's Fancy Cheese Company operates a 112,000 square foot plant, produce more than 30 varieties of artisan cheese sold globally in the retail market. Again, agribusiness, specialized facilities. It's almost agri-industrial is probably the best way of describing it, because it's definitely not residential. I wouldn't call it commercial largely. I would call it agri-industrial when you're talking about these facilities and the production of milk products, dairy products, things like that. So one thing that people tend to forget is that agriculture it's either the largest or one of the largest industries in the entire country. Consistently one of the largest. There's a lot of money that goes into agriculture development, specifically with regards to research and development and basically trying to better the agriculture industry. Real estate is a big portion of that. You know, when you're talking about things like more advanced milking barns, well, that milking barn has to go on a piece of real estate somewhere. When you're talking about being able to produce different grades of milk, that has to be processed somewhere. There's a lot of real estate tie-in that goes to this. So, you know, agribusiness, agri-industrial is definitely an opportunity zone or an opportunity industry, in my opinion, revolving around real estate, not just here in Western New York, but anywhere in the country. So that's my thoughts on that. I think that if you start looking for non-traditional places to invest in real estate, there's no shortage of them. It's just a matter of finding what it is that you want, the return that you're looking for, things of that nature. There is opportunity out there outside of residential real estate if that's got you running scared right now. One thing that I would probably avoid right now would be commercial office space, because I think that we are all in agreement that commercial office space is never going to come back the way that it once was. It's still going to be there, but I think that you're going to see a lot more co-working spaces and smaller offices and things like that. I don't think that it's going to be what it once was. I think that we're probably going to see a lot more of this shift towards a work from home or a partial work from home type of a scenario like many of us are experiencing right now. Let's take a look at, oh man, I don't remember, I think I pulled this one off of Facebook or maybe somebody sent it to me. I can remember when I was a kid, our cat was a nightmare. The second the Christmas tree went up, the cat was in the Christmas tree. And it was like that the entire season. So these people got a little bit creative and built a little bit of a safe barrier between the tree and I don't know if they're trying to prevent the kids from getting to it, the cats, the dogs, whatever. But a little bit of holiday cheer behind bars, I guess, if you will. Let's jump into our questions from housing providers around the country. We're going to start with this one on appliance damage. Tenant leaned on a drop-in range, cracking the control panel. The range still works, it's mostly cosmetic. The control panel cannot be replaced as it is no longer manufactured. The cost for a new drop-in from Lowe's ranges between $1,200 to $1,600. The owner has agreed to have a standalone installed instead, which will require some sawing to make the opening wide enough for a standard range. They run about $450 at Lowe's, plus the cord and taxes, brings it to about $500. The tenant's complaining about the cost and stated they would only pay the depreciated value. What say you? Is charging them the full cost of a cheaper replacement fair? If they can only be charged the depreciated value legally, what is the value? So I'm going to preface this by saying check your state law first and foremost. Some states do specify if you have to depreciate an asset before you deduct for a security deposit deduction or something like that. So check your state law first and foremost to see what that says with regards to that. Then you need to figure out, do you have to depreciate it based on the estimated usable life? Who determines that usable life? What method do you use to depreciate it? These are all things that you're probably going to want to talk to your accountant about. First your attorney and then your accountant about, I would say. And then I want to get into kind of how we handle that process here in our office. So step one for us is documenting the condition at the time of move-in. So for something like a refrigerator, I want photos of the inside, I want photos of the outside, I want photos of the drawers open to show that none of the drawers are broken. I want to see water coming out of the water dispenser. I want to see ice coming out of the ice dispenser, basically proving the condition of the appliance at the time of move-in. And that's important because eventually, if there is damage that's beyond reasonable wear and tear, you're going to want to have proof that you have a reasonable deduction. So that's why I always recommend documenting the condition at move-in as much as possible. to make sure that you understand what the condition of the appliance is at the time of move-in. One thing that people always forget to take a picture of is the model and serial tag inside the refrigerator. That's incredibly useful when you have to start shopping for parts or something like that, to have that model and serial number, because you can go right online and search for those parts using that model number. So the next thing I want to mention is, how was it damaged? And you mentioned here that this is pretty obviously tenant damage. Like, I wouldn't call it malicious damage, but it is tenant damage. It's beyond reasonable wear and tear. So for something like damage, we charge the full price it takes to restore it back to the condition it was in. So you mentioned that you aren't able to get the control panel here. We'll touch on that in a minute. But if say you were able to get the control panel, there's no depreciation on that repair. The tenant pays the full boat cost of the repair. They damaged the appliance. They need to bring it back to the condition that it was in prior to it being damaged. The other thing we always charge for is cleaning. So we make sure that an appliance is clean, as clean as we can get it when we turn the appliance over to the tenant at the time of move-in. We expect the appliance to come back to us clean, not with food in it, not with sludge slopped in the drawers, not with little bits of debris and condiments and stuff left in it. We want the fridge just as clean as we gave it to the tenant. If we have to clean it, we're charging the tenant for that cleaning. There's no depreciation on a cleaning charge. Now let's talk a little bit about wear and tear. If it is true wear and tear, something like, trying to think of something that might be wear and tear. Okay, we'll use the ice maker example. Ice makers fail all the time in refrigerators. The chances of that being a tenant-caused damage item is very, very slim. It's more than likely wear and tear. That's not something you can charge the tenant for. That's something that you're going to have to take care of as the property owner and get that repair taken care of. So moving forward here, we've talked about damage now. What if we have to replace the appliance like what you're doing here because you can't get the replacement part? We charge for the replacement based on the remaining useful life of the old appliance. So let's say that the drop-in stove that you had was 5 years old and it was a 10-year usable lifespan. And I'm just using numbers to make my math easy here. So essentially you have a stove that 50% of its life is depreciated at this point. It has 50% of its usable life remaining. Whatever the cost is to replace that appliance and get the new appliance in place and whatever you need to do, the tenant should be picking up half of that depreciated cost. So essentially the tenant should be taking on half of the expense of the new appliance, et cetera, because the other half would just be lost to depreciation, essentially. That's how we do it in our office. There are a lot of different ways to do this. I recommend talking to an attorney and an accountant in your area that understand the depreciation law and also understand how depreciation work to determine how you should do it in your market. This is how we do it here in our company here in Buffalo. On to the next one, cracked heat exchanger. This one is super important to me. And actually, I think I'm probably going to clip this segment of the show and put it out as its own separate segment. Servicing your furnaces and boilers at least once a year saves lives. I feel so strongly on this because I know it to be true on multiple levels. For those of you who don't know me prior to getting into real estate, but I wouldn't even get into all that. That's too much of a story for today's show. Even in real estate, we have encountered multiple situations where having a furnace serviced on a yearly basis has saved the lives of the occupants of the home because of this exact situation right here, the cracked heat exchanger. Spent my Saturday morning replacing the heat exchanger in our rental. Fortunately, it's been warm this past week. Been waiting on the part to arrive. Not as big a job as I thought it was going to be. And what you can see here is a cracked heat exchanger. What is a heat exchanger? A heat exchanger is exactly what it sounds like. It's the area where the heat exchanges from the heating element in your furnace to the air that's flowing through your home. Essentially, it's the separation between the flame and carbon monoxide that you don't want and the hot air that you do want. This is where the exchange happens. The blower motor pushes your home air over the heat exchanger. That air is warmed by the heat exchanger, and then the blower motor pushes it out through your vents and out to your house. A cracked heat exchanger is a great way to pump carbon monoxide, which is deadly and colorless and odorless, into your home or into your tenant's home. This is probably one of the easiest ways to kill a tenant in a residence, is a cracked heat exchanger. We require our clients every single year to have their furnaces serviced for this exact reason. The past 2 years, we have saved lives because we've had these furnace services done and uncovered cracked heat exchangers. Get your furnaces and boilers serviced at least once a year and make sure that they're checking the heat exchanger. I cannot emphasize this enough. In addition to the heat exchanger, when you're doing your furnace clean and checks, check your smoke and CO detectors. Tenants love to take down smoke and CO detectors. I don't know why. It's just a fact of life. And I really shouldn't say that because I know that I have a couple of smoke detectors that are down in my own house that need to go back up. So smoke and CO detectors save lives. I don't think that that's a real, unknown to anybody who might be watching the show. Smoke and CO detectors save lives. In New York, you have to have one smoke detector inside every bedroom, and you have to have a smoke and CO detector. We do within 10 foot of the outside of the bedroom doors. I believe it's actually 15 foot by code, but you can check the code for yourself and find that out. Smoke and CO detector outside of the bedroom door, smoke detector in every bedroom, and then at least one smoke and CO detector per floor. We check and change the batteries every single time we service the furnaces. Does it suck? A little bit. Are the batteries expensive? Yeah, but now we're into mostly the 10-year sealed units, and that's less of an issue. I wouldn't worry about the cost of a furnace service or the cost of a set of batteries if it means saving someone's life, is really what it boils down to here. I kind of got on a soapbox on this one, and I don't think that's really what I meant to do. But by the same token, it is what I meant to do, because you need to understand that furnaces work great until they're not working great. And when they're not working great, you could literally be causing carbon monoxide to flow into your home or to one of your tenants' homes. And that's not what you want to do. Get your furnace serviced every single year, no matter what. It's not expensive. The life you save could be your own. The life you save could be that of one of your tenants. I'll hop off my soapbox now. We'll move on to our next one. Notifying tenants about COVID. New York State landlord, multi-unit. If one of my tenants are positive for COVID, do I inform the other tenants of the building? Obviously keeping the identity private. No, you have no obligation. To the best of my knowledge, you have no obligation to inform other tenants that there's someone living near them that has COVID. I mean, you wouldn't tell them if that tenant had a car accident or if they had a mean case of the sniffles, or something along those lines. Like it's not like you just walk around sharing health information about tenants with other tenants. You're under no obligation here, to the best of my knowledge. And I wouldn't take the risk of spreading someone else's health information around in a situation such as this, regardless. To the best of my knowledge, I'm going to go ahead and reiterate again, no, I don't believe that you have any responsibility to alert other tenants in the building that there is somebody in the building that may have COVID. That being said, you do have an obligation to ensure that you are keeping your common areas and things as clean as possible, sanitizing on a regular basis, things like that. You may want to look into increasing your cleaning in the common areas or something like that, just to help offset some of the risk. But realistically speaking, if that person does have COVID, they should be self-isolated in their unit anyway, and it should be a pretty minimal concern. Guys, thank you so much for watching Ask a Property Manager. I truly do appreciate it. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can help us to improve by dropping a question in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and your question will be picked up and answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to your day, please do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, and subscribe helps us to share and grow and reach more people. Next week, we'll be back on December 9th, which is next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Be back with an all-new show that you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.